This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. On today's podcast clip, we have our very first repeat guest, Bob Moore. We have visitors here semi-regularly, and most of the time they're here for 2-3 days, maybe a week tops. And my experience with them is, they'll come early on. We often encourage to give a seminar or a presentation so everyone can understand who they are, where they're from, and I guess their research or industry expertise. And then usually for however long they're here, their calendar's pretty much booked. Every hour someone's taking them out for coffee or lunch or dinner. It must be a bit of a different experience when you're here for a longer period of time. How would you explain that to someone else if they were thinking, I'd like to take a sabbatical and go to a university rather than just being like a visiting academic for, 2, 3, 4 days?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to have a plan.
Okay.
I initially wanted to, when I first came for sabbatical, to sort of get set up and maybe even start doing some research while I was still at SCJ. And that didn't go over very well. I think I didn't have a very good plan of attack on, what I was going to do and how I was going to ask for things. And so I ended up spending my time doing other stuff and kind of learning the ropes. So I would say that the best thing to do if you're going to do a sabbatical is, I would say, when I came back the second time, I knew I wanted to work with Carl Treisner, right? So the whole point was for me to come and spend some time with Carl to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, right? So that was the objective. So I would say my advice, if you want to come for 6 or 8 weeks or however long your sabbatical would be, that you come to, first off, whenever you come, you want to basically enter fully into the academic life of the Institute. I taught some classes while I was there this last time. I gave a seminar. I helped people who were working on presentations, gave feedback that way. I met with students on their projects, right? So not as many as I would have liked, but I did meet with the students. And I think, one of the things that we're still struggling a little bit with post-COVID, not everybody was coming in all the time. And I think that was part of the problem with meeting people this time. But, the main thing is to have something very definitive worked out ahead of time on who you're going to be doing what with. And that'd be my advice, because I didn't have that the first time I came. I came looking for it and didn't really find it to the extent that I wanted to. Now, you and I did a couple things, and I got into the data a little bit, but I think that I would have been, the second time was much more successful, and I was able to get more done in a short period of time.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice, is sort of map out plans and meetings and projects almost before you get there, so then you can hit the ground running. Yeah, I think that's really solid advice. So you attended the Mental and Physical Availability Summit in New York, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, so I went to the one that was in Adelaide, but I know there was other ones, in Australia and Europe. How did you find the summit?
I thought it was great. Of course, I'll feel that way because I helped prepare it.
Biased.
So I have a biased point of view. But I think that what was good about it was a lot of the stuff that I saw was still very rough, and I was sort of helping out, and there were some things that had to actually, I kind of got them down a path, and they really had to be completely torn down and rebuilt. And so some stuff looked really different. Some of it looked the same, but some of it looked really different. But seeing the final product was really great. What I thought was very, very good about it was it was for sponsors only. And so the audience that was there because they really wanted to be there and they really wanted to learn, and they were super engaged. And so there was a lot of really good conversation at breaks. It was very well run in the sense that once everybody came out of the room, there was no problem with icebreakers. Everybody was talking to everybody, lots of questions. So very strong summit in terms of content and engagement. And I think people went away very happy with that they had come.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things. And some of the messages that we've gotten back from sponsors are, yeah, just how engaging and enjoyable it actually was. So with the Institute, how are you planning to, obviously you got some projects working with Carl. Are there any other things that you've got lined up to sort of stay engaged?
No, I mean, I'm like I said, they've asked for my input on like where should we have this summit in the U.S. Since I've given some suggestions on places to go that are not New York or Chicago, that would be kind of fun places to go for the people from the Institute as well as from the U.S. So I'm hoping that I'll get an invitation to come to the executive training.
Mhm.
As being sort of the man on the ground in the U.S. That would be a lot of fun. If I can't, that's fine. I understand why. It's certainly limited for space and so on. But I think mostly what I'm trying to do is, sort of stay involved through the research, doing reading. I think one of the things that's been nice about being retired is I have a lot more time for things like reading marketing books.
Mm.
I'm reading a couple books on behavioral science now. And I think when we were talking on the first podcast, you asked me if I read business books, and I was like, no, I
Mhm.
don't. I work, but now it's like that's the part of my life that's missing,
Mhm.
right? So I go before it was like that's what I did all the time. So I didn't take the business books on the airplane, right?
Mm.
But now I'm like I don't have that anymore. So now I'm reading this stuff,
Mm.
and so and I have time to listen to podcasts. A lot of times when I'm working in the yard, I've got a podcast on,
Mhm.
and I'm some podcasts while I'm like moving rocks and things,
Mhm.
So it's keeping me sort of fresh and engaged, and what's going on. I think one of the things that I'm concerned. I don't want to say it's really concerning, but I think it's kind of inevitable in some sense that you know I'm going to be seeing like an erosion of skills um, because I don't do the stuff every day anymore.
Mm.
Right. So from my perspective about like what would I be good at for consulting? When I first left SCJ, I could have gone in, basically, if someone was looking to replace like a director of insights or something, I could have said, hey, you know what, if you need somebody to like fill in
Mm.
till you get your permanent person, I could do that for you, right? I don't know that I could do that anymore, right? Because I'm 2.5 years into retirement.
Mm.
I feel like, you know, the skills are getting a little rusty. And so that's why I'm really trying to keep the marketing science stuff
Mm.
fresh and strong. And, because I don't want to lose my edge there.
Mm.
And so I'm continuing to, work on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you're reading more, have you ever thought about writing more? Not necessarily for Harvard Business Review or an academic journal or a conference. You could write a book. Is that something you've ever considered?
I have, but I wish I had kept notes
Yeah.
because I have a lot of good stories, as you know.
Yeah.
And, so I would probably, your memory gets twisted over time, right? You remember things that didn't happen and things that did happen, you forget. And so my memoirs would probably be very highly inaccurate these days. But I mean, I could really, I just remember there was so much silliness that I saw marketers do
Mm.
that I could probably write a book about that.
Mm.
Um, but it feels slightly mean spirited for one thing, and then although no names would be named, of course, right? The guilty would be remain anonymous, but I think that I don't know that I have the depth of experience in anything to sort of write a book, but I think that I can write articles. I can write, this article about how switching doesn't really happen, right? That what you see when you look at a buyer flow analysis and you look and you say, well, here's people that bought the category or bought the brand in both years, and here's the people that bought it this year and not the next, and you start looking and you start drilling down into what they're buying in the category. What you find is that the reason that people left you is because the buyer flow analysis picks the people who are the light buyers because they left the brand. They didn't buy it 2 years in a row. So you're looking at light buyers and heavier buyers, and they behave in predictable ways. And you end up with a lot of results that would be surprising to most marketers because they don't think people who are managing a brand, they think people that buy the brand, that they kind of own those people, that those are their buyers. And those buyers are like, if they buy something else, like they're not being loyal. Well, it turns out that, people are polygamously loyal. And what's really interesting is you just see how widespread that is when you do a buyer flow analysis and you look at the rest of the category. And so, that's the kind of thing which is really interesting. It's something that most marketers would find surprising. I think they might find it useful and humbling a little bit, and might make them think about how they would market their brand differently if they knew just how disloyal their buyers are. And so to me, that's like an important paper to write and get out there and to get published and to talk about, because it's not the way people think. And and part of it's because of this Kotlerian view of how you're taught about, you're segmenting the market and you have your target and you're going to try to satisfy them to drive the loyalty and all of those kinds of things that don't really happen the way that they're described in the textbook. And so, and that's the thing that, I keep sort of pounding away at, in my LinkedIn posts and when I'm working with, my friends that are like at other companies now, and now that I'm no longer at SUJ, that this is the way the world really works, and it's really important that you understand that. So that's kind of what motivates me, and I think I could write these small little things. I don't think I could write a book.
Yeah. You could write case studies or chapters or something in someone else's book as well. Whole host of different options, because obviously,
but I do have an issue. I do have an issue with case studies, though.
Okay.
So case studies are post hoc rationalizations, right? And there's no counterfactual. This is part of the problem with the way marketing is taught, right? I learned marketing through doing case studies, Harvard Business School case studies, right? And so, you're presented with something and then you're asked what to do. And of course, you're doing it within the context of what you were taught with Kotler. And there's kind of like a right answer and a wrong, right? Well, the fact that the company did something and they failed or they didn't fail, it doesn't mean that their actions were the reason that they failed or didn't fail, right? It's all you're seeing is what happened, right? And there's no proof, right? This is why the laws of growth are so important, right? Because they tell you how the marketplace should work. So like, someone could say, well, I have a really good example. We had a brand at SCJ that was a natural brand that we bought, and we started growing it. We started putting some money behind it. But the people who were doing the marketing originally, they were doing all this really high cost, low reach stuff, like trade, like stuff like going to trade shows and sampling. And they would sample with a full bottle of product. And they would say, we have this super loyal, group of people that love our stuff and they're buying it. Well, when you did the panel data and you looked at it, you found that 85% of their buyers who bought this year didn't buy the next year, right? It was classic light buyers of the brand, and the people who bought them were heavy buyers of the category, all the things that you would learn. So they did all this stuff and they said, this is why they were successful and why they grew. Well, the reason they grew was they kept expanding their distribution network, right? And they kept getting more and more product, and eventually they got more mainstream advertising, and they grew their mental and physical availability. And it was mostly the physical availability that was driving all their growth. So then they go and they take this brand to Europe and they go with this playbook. Now, the business analytics people, me and again, my friend who I was helping there, were saying, no, right? Don't listen to that. Like, this is what you need to do to grow. Well, they listened to what the marketers did and the brand failed, right? So they had a case study, right? And again, it's like there's no counterfactual to it. The brand, they did all this stuff and the brand grew. And I would argue that the brand grew in spite of what they did, right? And they were very fortunate they were able to grow the brand. And so they did some things right, but they didn't know what the right things were because they were focusing on their consumer part of it, when the reality is all that they were really doing was making their product available to more people on more shopping occasions. And they found the product in the store and bought it. And, and again, they had repeat business and all that kind of stuff. And they did a lot of things right. But the thing that they thought drove the business, especially at the beginning, was not the thing that drove the business, right? And so again, it's like, so for me, it's case studies kind of like it's like a couple of dirty words, because they say, well, look, I did this and it worked, so this is what you should do, and there's no science behind it. It's just it's just an observation. It might be true and it might not be.
That's a very good point, actually.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY. For my take on the marketing issues of the day.
That was the Zac Anesbury Show.